So we told you yesterday that Romelu Lukaku was on the verge of a move to Roma. That is happening. He's on his way to Italy today. 2 years on and £100 million later. Is it a failure at Stamford Bridge? I think it can only be sort of perceived in those circumstances now, Simon. And who should shoulder the majority of the blame, Chelsea or the player?
I think it's a failing on all parts, isn't it? Because ultimately the breakdown was Lukaku talking out of school to an Italian journalist about the manner in which he was being played. So that would tell that there must have been some communication breakdown when the player was brought into Chelsea with his expectations about what was said to him at the time and subsequently what manifested itself. And then you've got the situation where you've got the player, refusing to accept his lot and work his way around and get himself in a position with the manager prior to that interview. Now, obviously, some of it was also about not being played when he was coming back from being fit and so on and so forth. So I think it's a breakdown on both parts. I think ultimately the player stepped out of line and didn't have the right to say the things that he said. I think it was turned into a far bigger drama than it needed to have been. But Lukaku now is in a situation where clearly he straddles two ownership models. So there's different personnel in the building, from manager to owner, and neither has been able to find an accord. He couldn't find an accord with Tuchel. I don't suppose there was that much investment from Abramovich, but there surely would have been from Marina and Bruce Buck and whoever else was there to try and right the situation. You've now got a new ownership model in Todd Bowley and a new set of managers, and still they've not been able to find an accord with the player. So that situation seems to be beyond rectification.
Does that suggest that maybe the player himself has had enough of being there? Being tied to the football club?
Well,
doesn't feel supported by them.
Well, I don't know why he wouldn't feel supported, because he is the architect of his own downfall. Now, none of us are privy to the conversations that he had with Tuchel when he joined the club for £97 million. I'm not entirely sure what contract he signed, whether it's a 3 or 4 year contract. But if it's a 4 year contract, then Chelsea are going to be loath to sell him for anything less than £50 million, because ultimately that's going to put them in a position where they're going to lose money. There's no way they would be letting him go out on loan without the other side. Something was made, and I was reading the brief that Chelsea wanted Roma to pick up his wages. Well, of course they bloody do. They're getting a player on loan they've paid no money for. So with due respect, of course, the very least they expect Roma to do is pick up his salary.
Well, he's agreed to take a pay cut because Roma can only afford to pay a certain proportion of that, and Chelsea aren't going to supplement it.
Well, I don't see how Chelsea can't.
Well, no, they've renegotiated the contract in which he will come back next year.
If Chelsea have done that, then they've done it for their own reasons and ultimately to reduce some of the cost implications, because technically speaking, Chelsea have a contract and whoever takes him on loan has to can pay a certain proportion towards it, and Chelsea are contractually obliged to take another.
But
so there has to be some cooperation between the two parties, isn't there? Because Lukaku could have sat there and simply said, you have a contract with me, I'm on £200,000 a week, I couldn't care less if Roma pay you £10,000 a week, you've got to pick up the other 190. So Chelsea and Lukaku have found some accord.
Exactly.
So there is some dialogue that's sensible, and clearly the desire is to sell him. Now, the reasons why they're not selling him is because nobody probably wants to meet the expectation of what Chelsea want economically.
He's even signed a contract so that if he comes back next summer, then he will take a reduction in wages as well, which shows, I think, that he wants to get out and play football on a regular basis, and he's desperate not to do it at Chelsea.
But it also shows the reality of where his position is, because if Chelsea want to try to command a transfer fee, and they've also got him on wages that are a deterrent, it's a double-edged sword for people. Chelsea want top money, perceived top money, to be able to... Because Chelsea can't be selling players. It suits Chelsea to have him on their balance sheet right now, because if they start selling him at £40 million to get him out the door, they're going to book losses. And Chelsea, as we know right now, despite the protestations of even me looking at their financial fair play obligations that I think they'll be able to overcome this season but struggle next, they need to be selling players for gains, not for losses, not just salary reductions, but also for transfer fee gains. And if they sell him for less than £50 million now, they're going to be in a loss situation. So in a year's time, Chelsea will have him on their balance sheet at £25 million. All of a sudden, if they're selling for £50 million because he's had a decent season at Roma, they've made £25 million contribution towards their financial fair play travails.
87 goals in 166 games at Everton, 42 goals in 96 for Manchester United, 64 in 95 for Inter Milan. At Chelsea, he's 15 goals in 44 appearances in his second spell. He's an absolute goal scorer when it comes to international football. With Belgium, it's 75 goals in 108 caps. Why is top-level football decided that it doesn't need Romelu Lukaku?
Well, not all top-level football decided that. I mean, ultimately, his achievements at Italy were significant, weren't they?
But playing at Roma is not top top elite level football, is it?
Well, no, it's close to it. You're paying for arguably one of the most renowned managers in the world. Ironically, that I thought you'd fallen out with when he didn't really want to play in the FA Cup final. So that circle is one I can't entirely square.
It's the third time that they've.
But there must be enough of a situation there. I would wonder if Mourinho would be signing him if Tammy Abraham were fit, and of course, if there was a transfer fee attached to it. This is a slightly economic deal that Roma can afford, and maybe everyone's sucked their cheeks in and gone, this works for everybody. He's clearly a good player. He's clearly an intelligent man. I've seen him being interviewed. He's a polyglot, speaks 5-6 different languages, a very capable and talented young man. But there seems to be, like with a lot of footballers, a desire to have things your own way, only your own way. And if it isn't your own way, then there's a problem with you getting your head around it. He didn't seem to have that problem in Milan. He does seem to have that problem in Man United. He was very good at Everton. There's no doubt he's a top quality footballer. There's no doubt. What the challenge seems to be in fitting into meeting his expectations, because the real issue at Chelsea wasn't his desire to go back, because he wanted to go back, was his expectations when he got back of what he was receiving, what he expected to receive, how he expected to be played, when he expected to be played, departed from how it manifested itself.
It's interesting you say that, the need to have everything his own way, or certain players need to have certain things all their own way, because he did have a great time into the first spell that he was there, and he struck up a great partnership with Lautaro Martinez. But then when he went back on loan the second time, it didn't work out as well as maybe he had hoped, and then he's burnt his bridges with Inter Milan
because he courted Juve.
He courted Juve, and then going from Inter to Juve is like going from United to Liverpool.
I don't suppose he courted Juve. His agent courted Juve, although he'd be mandating his agent. It's personnel. He clearly, whether you like it or you don't, he needs to be handled in a certain way, communicated with in a certain way. Now, maybe first time round at Milan, he was communicated in a way that suited him. It was Conte, right?
Yeah, and the second time around, Inzaghi doesn't have the same sort of feeling for him.
So he doesn't have the same relationship, he doesn't have the same dynamic, so then he has a different outcome. So he's one of those players that you have to handle in a certain way, and you have to price that into your thinking when you sign them. Because one of the things that I'm always maintaining is better in football now, and seeing itself as far better, is the diligence going into signing players.
Should Chelsea have known this then when they signed him for 100 million quid?
Well, again, you can only get what someone puts in front of you. If someone puts in front of you that they have a certain attitude, and the attitude is different when he walks through the door, short of analysing what their thoughts are and understanding and putting them into pressure situations where you can see the natural reaction, which is not going to be achieved in a transfer transaction, you're going to have to take a view based upon what you think you know, based upon the player's ability against what you think you've discovered. Now, whether Tuchel was complicit in creating a situation, whether it was blown into a storm of a teacup, but I certainly think that his actions in that interview were ill-advised. But I also didn't think at the time that it was the most heinous of crimes.
Interesting, because he did apologise for it, and this is what he said back in 2022.
I think I should been much clearer in my message, to be honest, because the interview was about saying goodbye to the Interfans. It was not about, trying to disrespect the fans and the football club, the owner, my teammates and the manager and his technical staff, because, they did a lot of efforts to bring me back here, and I wanted to come back here. I was on a mission since I left, so, I totally understand the frustrations of the fans, but now it's on me to, make sure that, I show my commitment at 100%. And, I will do that from every game. I came here when I was 18. It didn't went so well. Now I'm back here, 28. I think in the prime years of my career, I can't really mess this up. I really worked hard for the last 10 years to get this opportunity, and I'm really happy to be here. And I think I have to show my commitment to the club, to the fans, and make sure that at this football club we win games and a lot of trophies at the end of the season.
Bearing in mind what you said before about you didn't think it was the most heinous crime in the world anyway the first time that he opened his mouth, the fact that he did that interview, should that not have been the end of it?
Well, I think so, but he compounded the problem by his form when he came back wasn't particularly compelling, was it? He is, again, you can see how articulate he is because he's not talking in his primary tongue, he's talking in English, and he's got such an eloquence about him that he can convey the message across. But what I would say is if you wanted to make it about saying goodbye to Inter Milan, then you should have made it about saying goodbye to Inter Milan and not brought in what was happening to you at Chelsea. He, like a lot of people in football, often their grasp is exceeded by their reach and they need to be brought back into line. Why you've got the referees at this moment in time doubling down on players is because the players have pushed the envelope too far, and you've got this correction going on. And in this situation with Lukaku, because there's no people don't put ceilings on what footballers can do. So they take liberty, and all of a sudden it's an outrage, and then everyone jumps on top of it. In this instance, he's basically said what he thinks he can say. And he thinks he can get away with it. And he's been brought into line and doesn't think he can get away with it. Then it's been turned into this great big storm, and it's gotten worse. Now, if he'd have come back and all of a sudden Lukaku was like a flying machine scoring goals, this would have soon found its natural place, which is people would have gone not very happy with that. But we move on because we damn well know that football fans, with due respect to them, have short memories.
Especially if he was scoring goals.
That's my point.
He is a goal machine. 75 goals in 108 appearances for Belgium. I mentioned earlier at Manchester United, 28 goals in 66 league games, 47 in 72.
It's the finances that are in the way of this deal. It's the finances in the way of this deal. Chelsea have got a £97 million pup on their hands, which is sitting on their balance sheet at 50 million quid with huge wages, and they don't want to break any situation where they're losing money on it. And so no one's particularly inclined to give Chelsea a helping hand on this one. The only people that were prepared to give him a helping hand were maybe Todd's new mates in Saudi, where he might be using that as a dumping ground for things that he doesn't want. We can speculate on that. Right. And he didn't want to go there. So in fairness to the player, he clearly wants to play.
He does want to play.
Because we could turn around and say, like he could do like the rest of the mercenaries, have a spotted handkerchief and a cat and go down the Golden Road to Saudi Arabia, like Dick Whittington.
He does. What an image. He does want to play, which is why he's taken a pay cut. But should Chelsea have done a little bit more to try and keep him, try and get the best out of him? Wonder what Chelsea fans, bearing in mind the problems that they've had over the last few years with strikers, think about that. 03717 22 3344.
Jim White and Simon Jordan. Monday to Friday mornings from 10 on AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.